Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Michael Hanlon. He's a Senior Fellow and Director of Research in Foreign Policy at the Brookings Institute. Michael, always good to speak with you.
Greetings, nice to be with you.
Hi there. So, the DPRK has now launched 3 missiles in the past week, 7 launches in a month. Why this sudden barrage? What's the message being sent here?
It's an excellent question. Well, first of all, part of it is perhaps not about messaging at all, but military capability. There are ongoing North Korean missile development programs, and as you're probably well aware, large countries like China and the United States, if they're developing new missiles, they do dozens of tests, not just 7. So in that sense, there's no great surprise at a purely technical level. But I still think your question is correct to assume there's a broader political message that's intended and conveyed. And I think the short answer is that the North Koreans want attention. They don't like the fact that they're being strangled economically by sanctions and by their own COVID restrictions. And the combination, of course, has reduced their GDP, which was quite shaky to begin with, by perhaps 20% over the last 4 years. And so I think they're looking for some kind of diplomatic engagement on terms favorable to them that can bring sanctions relief fairly soon. It's a dangerous game to play to hope that provocations lead to concessions, but I think that's often the only tool in their toolkit that they can play.
And is that actually usually, to build on this point, the real goal of all these tests, global attention, sanction relief, more aid? Is that typically why they launch these missiles?
Again, I think you have to look at it twofold, because we have so little information about the North Korean regime and North Korean decision-making that we have to just look at the facts on the table. And these tests do help with the development of new weapon systems. So if there were people anywhere in the West who were somehow of the impression, the misperception, that North Korea's military capabilities were weakening or diminishing, this would be a way for North Korea to signal to the world that, in fact, in some ways, they're improving. Now, I don't have any doubts that North Korea's military is still strong in many ways, but the North Koreans may worry that people could reach the wrong conclusion. I think we have to assume that's a big part of it. But second, we have to assume, yes, they are trying to shake up the diplomacy. And as you know, they don't really have many friends. Even China, their one ally, is not particularly happy about their behavior in recent years. And the United States, under Biden, has been unwilling to continue with the kind of symmetry that President Trump carried out. So President Biden's looking for a more sort of normal, low-key, restrained approach, but the North Koreans aren't interested in that. They want to think bigger, bolder, and at a higher level. So I think they're trying to get our attention at a time when they've noticed that Vladimir Putin has figured out that military provocation does get people's attention, and maybe they're trying to emulate him a little bit.
Interesting. And of course, Sunday's test is the boldest in years. I mean, the weapon is capable of striking the U.S. territory of Guam. Do you foresee an escalation? Should we expect more, perhaps even an intercontinental ballistic missile test?
Well, the North Koreans have said, as you know, that these intercontinental tests are now being reconsidered, as are nuclear tests. And I do think the North Koreans are essentially sending us, as you say, a message that if we really want to make sure those things don't happen, we're going to have to come forward with some kind of an as yet unspecified or ill-defined proposal to engage them diplomatically and perhaps break the logjam on sanctions relief, which, of course, they would like to have be comprehensive. We want it to be step-by-step in return for certain kinds of nuclear and other denuclearization. So I think they want a big proposal, and I think there are certain kinds of big proposals we could make that still protect our interests. So I would advocate for that in the Biden team. The only problem is you don't want to give in to somebody who's pointing a gun at your head or missiles at Guam. So it becomes a very delicate game to play. I think we should get on top of this soon rather than wait for that ICBM test or that nuclear test, because then it's probably too late.
And Michael, at the very heart of all this, how formidable a nuclear power is North Korea?
Well, they're top 10 in the world, right? Because there are only 9 established nuclear weapon states and maybe a 10th in the making in the broader Middle East. So they're top 9 in the world. And that's a pretty small group. That's a pretty elite company. And we don't really know how well those weapons would work if they were delivered by ballistic missile. But simple nuclear weapons designs are relatively resilient and relatively easy to make detonate with high confidence. So I think we have to assume that they could do a lot of damage in Northeast Asia. Whether or not they could reach Guam or the United States mainland is another question. But we have allies and Americans and friends like China and Korea and Japan in Northeast Asia. So the threat is already serious enough that we should all take it very seriously.
And as usual, a watch and see. Michael Hanlon, we always thank you for your insight.